When we finally destroy society, I hope I become a warlord. My name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, this video is sponsored by Scentbird. If you've been here for any length of time, you'll probably already know about the hierarchy of victimhood. Or, you know, just victimhood in general. Because we've talked a lot about third wave feminism on this channel. And our friends over at Feminist Island are basically experts now at finding innocuous things to complain about. But as a general rule, I think the hierarchy of victimhood is a really interesting concept. In a day and age where everybody identifies as something or someone, where we place a great deal of emphasis on our immutable characteristics and then use those characteristics to explain how and why we're being oppressed, it's not difficult to see and understand how we are preferenced based on how many stamps we have on our oppression card. Think about it like a rewards card at Starbucks. Except instead of getting a free commie coffee, you just get to complain. All the time. To everyone. For free. But this conversation is not a new one. And what makes it all the more interesting is how rapidly it has changed and how it's being employed today, even to the detriment of some groups who once occupied the top of the list. Like the women. We once occupied the top, but no more. The growing importance of transgender legislation, policy, and discussion seems to have placed this community, in many cases, above all others. And the effects of that have had far-reaching implications. In recent weeks, we heard a story about a young girl who was sexually assaulted at a school in Virginia, in the girls' bathroom, by allegedly a gender-fluid boy in a skirt. The school board not only covered it up, but they vilified the girl's father in the process. Parents in the area found themselves on the receiving end of the hierarchy of victimhood, suddenly stuck in a debate about whose rights matter more. Which is what we're going to talk about today. But before you do that, and you once again board my gondola of sads and we traverse deeper into the depths of what the hell is Stan, let's hear from our sponsor, Scentbird. I like to smell good, which is why I take showers. And you probably do too. Which is why Scentbird is such a neat subscription. I won't lie, I was actually so happy when Scentbird offered to sponsor another video because I used up every single perfume they sent me the last time around. And it paid off because now I'm not such a disgusting swamp monster. And now I have 3 more scents in these neat little containers. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service. It gives you the opportunity to choose from over 600 indie and designer brands. It's also a flexible subscription, meaning you can skip any month without penalties. Basically, you choose a scent you'd like to try. There are colognes, perfumes, and unisex options. Then Scentbird sends you a 30-day supply so you don't have to commit to a full bottle. This month, although they all smell really good, Sugarful Dream is definitely my favorite. Makes me feel like a pretty daisy. Anyway, Scentbird is great as a gift for yourself, for your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or your MRF. Don't actually spray your MRF. Maybe not such a good idea. So click the link in the description and use my code SW2 for 30% off your first month. Do so and make your nose holes happy. On June 22nd, a father called Scott Smith attended a school board meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia. On the agenda was a proposal to allow students to use the bathroom of whichever sex corresponds with their self-declared gender identity. Scott Smith was arrested at this meeting. A video of that arrest went viral. It showed Smith's bloody face and police pinning him to the ground. What a lot of people didn't know was that Smith said his daughter was sexually assaulted in a girl's bathroom by a boy wearing a skirt. A person who, at the time, was said to identify as gender fluid.
Scott Smith is alleging the school covered up the rape of his 9th grade daughter after she was sexually assaulted in the ladies' room by a boy wearing a skirt.
An activist at this meeting told Smith that she didn't believe his daughter was raped. The school superintendent, Scott Ziegler, said that we don't have any record of assaults occurring in our bathrooms. The predator transgender student or person simply does not exist. Smith was sentenced to 10 days in jail, all suspended, contingent upon a year of good behavior. The Commonwealth attorney also pushed for a fine and a requirement for anger management training. Smith, unsurprisingly, appeared sad and incredulous in interviews.
I wasn't there for any, I'm good with gay people, cross-gender people, everybody. Anybody who wants to be a good American, I'm good with. I went there to find out why our children weren't safe. And the next thing I know, another parent, activist, approached my wife and started antagonizing her. And I turned around and said stop. And then I tried to tell the lady what had happened to my daughter. And she looked me dead in the face and said, "That's not what happened."
Only a short while later in September, it seemed as though the situation was being used as fodder by the National School Board Association. It wrote a letter to President Biden likening protesting parents to domestic terrorists and suggesting that counter-terrorism measures in the Patriot Act should be deployed against them.
The National School Boards Association wrote to the president to say that their teachers feel like some parents protesting recently could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism. And then the Attorney General put the FBI on the case. So does the administration agree that parents upset about their kids' curriculums could be considered domestic terrorists?
What the Department of Justice said in a letter from the Attorney General is that, quote, threats against public servants are not only illegal, they run counter to our nation's core values. That is true. These were threats against public servants, threats against members of the school board. Regardless of the reasoning, threats and violence against public servants is illegal. That's what he was conveying from the Department of Justice.
But the Department of Justice does now have the FBI on this. Something that the School Boards Association is asking for is for the administration to consider using the Patriot Act to investigate some of these school board protesters. So would the administration be okay with the FBI using the Patriot Act to surveil these parents if that is what they decide?
I don't speak on behalf of the National School Board Association. I speak on behalf of this government. The Attorney General has put out a letter. They will take actions they take, and I would point to them for more information.
I like that real domestic terrorists like Antifa are considered an idea, but parents who care about what their children are being taught, they're bad. They're so bad. I mean, I can't speak for other parents, but I will say that my mom was terrifying when I was a teenager, but she still wasn't a terrorist. Just a horrifying demon lady. I'm just kidding. I love you, Mom. Please don't send me fish in the mail. Smith, like any father, turned up to a school board meeting to express his anger and concerns around the sexual assault of his daughter. But instead of his concerns being met with real sympathy or interest, he was ridiculed, arrested, silenced, and eventually used to justify a bizarre FBI-driven clampdown on parents. It makes me question how we got to this point in the first place, and honestly, why we're here at all. For a long time, we've been exposed to the idea that the interests of certain groups come before others. It's like being stuck in a forever game of tit for tat, except nobody wins. And if you do win, the prize is depression. In my video about the erasure of women, I discuss how transgender policy and ideology was and is contributing to the erasure of womanhood. And much of this conversation just feels like an extension of that. And the reason why is predicated on who we deem the most at-risk group in society. The more at risk, the more privileges, benefits, and preferential treatment awarded to that group by politicians, allies, as they like to call them, the media, and the education system. The problem is that in trying to push transgender policy, and in trying to ensure that transgender people are not viewed negatively, a sexual assault victim fell by the wayside. As of October 2021, the skirt-wearing boy has been found guilty of rape. In fact, in an interview, his mother said he doesn't identify as transgender, he just likes to wear skirts sometimes. She also noted that he is a troubled boy who identifies as male, not transgender, and at the time of the assault, just wanted sex. What even is this? Side note, this whole interview is a complete mess, and I don't really want to get into it because we don't have the time. So if you would like to read it on your own, I will link it in the description and you can suffer in your own time. You know, when we're done suffering together. Just think of it as a bonding experience, one that you can't get away from. and you didn't ask to be part of. To make matters worse, in the same month, news broke that Scott Ziegler had lied back in June when he told parents that no sexual assaults had occurred in school bathrooms in the area. In an email to the school board from May, he wrote, "The purpose of this email is to provide you with information regarding an incident that occurred at Stonebridge High School. This afternoon, a female student alleged that a male student sexually assaulted her in the restroom. The LCSO is investigating the matter." The male student was then transferred to another school in the county where he allegedly proceeded to sexually assault another girl, where, according to police, he forced the victim into an empty classroom at Broad Run High School where she was held against her will and inappropriately touched. I'd like to know how this boy was allowed to assault two girls, why the school board was allowed to cover it up and why it covered it up in the first place, and why a father was dragged through the mud when he was right all along. In a Spike article I found, one writer proposes an explanation. The school board could not let anything stand in the way of imposing their transgender policy. They were on a moral mission, and a case of sexual assault in the school bathroom could not be allowed to derail it. A plumber and his young daughter were dispensable. They could be sacrificed on the altar of woke. Where women's rights once dominated conversations surrounding safety, fairness, and equality, they've fallen behind other minority groups whose rights and issues appear to be viewed as more important. And whether or not you agree with that happening, it's having a wide range of effects. Where parental rights were once held in high regard, they've drifted further and further towards the bottom of societal priorities. Your parents smack you, the state smacks them, and somewhere an ovary shrivels up and dies. That joke makes no sense. It's been a long day. Now here the conversation often gets muddied. Proponents of the transgender community argue that these discussions make all transgender people seem like predators. They also argue that bathrooms and other spaces are imperative for the inclusion of transgender people in our communities. The problem arises from the fact that these policies can and will always be abused, especially given that self-identification is a cornerstone of this entire conversation, allowing people to determine the sex with which they identify and then using the facilities or sporting events and so on predicated on that choice. In this case, rather than placing emphasis on the safety of young women, it was more important to institute a policy that appeared to be inclusive and accepting of the transgender community, but one that was probably not very well thought out that could easily be abused. Placing the transgender community at the top of the priority list is why we live in a period of time where someone feeling as though they've been misgendered is more important than freedom of speech. It's why we're seeing a growing number of people referring to women as vulva owners and birthing people. In 2018, the Girl Guides expelled 2 leaders who opposed equality and diversity rules, as they called them, that allowed transgender identifying males to share showers and other facilities with girls as young as 5. Only a few months ago, a Scottish female university student was investigated for saying women have vaginas during an online seminar on transgender issues, where she was then promptly accused of transphobia and called in for a disciplinary hearing. For the last few years, we've seen an influx of biological male criminals in women's prisons. In fact, this story reminded me of another I'd seen recently. As The Telegraph reported, women prisoners who call transgender inmates he or him face extra jail time. The story, which is behind a paywall, goes on to add that female inmates who deliberately use the wrong pronouns could be punished under rules that bar threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behavior. Because remember, words in the United Kingdom are violence. And apparently much worse than actual violence. The penalties will be decided by an independent adjudicator, a visiting judge, who has the power to impose additional days if they feel the abuse merits such a punishment. The article also notes that in 2019, there are 34 transgender women who were still legally male detained at the 12 women's prisons in England and Wales. Real talk for a second, what do these people think prison is actually like? Rainbows and scones? Hello, friend, you look lovely in your jumpsuit. Why, thank you, kind miss. I think orange is your colour. Why, thank you. Now I shall go and make a spot of wine from my cell toilet cavity. Toodle pip. Yeah, that got weird real fast. Look, all I can say about this policy is that I have a lot of questions. In July, the Daily Wire reported that California prisons would give female inmates condoms and Plan B after the state started housing inmates based on their gender identity rather than their sex. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, Kara Dansky of the Women's Human Rights Campaign outlined California's policy, explaining that at least one inmate had become pregnant.
We see approximately 300 applications from male prisoners to be housed in the women's prison in California. We approximate that 20 of them have been granted. There are 20 men being housed in women's prisons in California now, as far as we know. We suspect that none of the applications has been denied. We also know that in Washington state, approximately 9 male convicted felons are being housed in a women's prison. One of those men has been convicted of multiple murders of women, and another one of those men has been convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl. We know that in states all over this country, there are various policies or actual statutory laws on the books that allow for this, in fact, mandate it. A couple things. One is, yes, these women are being held under absolutely torturous conditions, and there's some reporting coming out that are saying these women are absolutely terrified. It has also been preliminarily reported that one woman in a California prison has been pregnant and that the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is distributing condoms. Now, what this tells to me is not only that do California prison officials understand and anticipate that these men will be raping these women, they also understand that these people being transferred to women's prisons are not women, they are men. It completely uncovers the lie that, quote unquote, trans women are men, or trans women are women, and California prison officials know that.
But again, it goes to show that the powers that be are more concerned with protecting the feelings of a particular group of people rather than putting emphasis and consideration into protecting the health and safety of the wider female population. And we can easily extend this into other areas of life. Sports, where female athletes are being passed over to make room for transgender competitors. Even Dave Chappelle's recent Netflix special drew ire. People were more concerned with his comments about transgender individuals than anything else. You know, even like just enjoying the comedy of it all.
I agree, man. Gender is a fact. You have to look at it from a woman's perspective. Look at it like this. Caitlyn Jenner, whom I've met, wonderful person. Caitlyn Jenner was voted Woman of the Year. Her first year as a woman. Ain't that something? Beat every bitch in Detroit, she's better than all of you. Gender is a fact. This is a fact. Every human being in this room, every human being on earth had to pass through the legs of a woman to be on earth. That is a fact.
Netflix was not upset about putting Cuties on its platform, a film that sexualizes little girls, but it was in an uproar over jokes about this particular minority group.
We need to say it's not okay. This hate conversation was not their intention. We understand that jokes are jokes, things are things, but at the end of the day, if it's promoting hate and it's promoting discrimination, you are directly a cause of it if you're allowing it to happen and you're not doing anything about it. And that goes for anyone in this country, specifically people of power in the entertainment industry.
I don't want to be unkind or anything, but why do the protesty people always look like this? Why? Now, of course, looking into all of this led me to another concept and idea called the hierarchy of suffering. It's exactly as depressing as it sounds. One Substack writer that I found called Aaron Hewitt summarized it as the following. There's no denying that we are currently witnessing an attempt to categorize people with certain characteristics into groups, some of which are deemed to be more marginalized and at risk than others. Consequently, by this standard and way of thinking about justice, it would be justifiable to grant some groups privileges in order to balance the social scale. In short, the greater your perceived suffering, the greater your privileges in society. Further than that, you're either a victim and therefore deserving of sympathy and support, or you're part of the privileged class and therefore deserving of neither. So what exactly happens when two victim groups battle one another? We don't. Because I would win. You're a cis heteronormative white person with a really tiny head. It's not that tiny, it's really tiny. As in the case of Dave Chappelle, it's clear that support for the transgender community won out. when it might have been otherwise considered racist to criticize Chappelle in any other situation because he's black, in this situation, all of that fell by the wayside. According to those writing about this topic, Chappelle deserved the criticism because he was making comments about a group higher up on the hierarchy of suffering. In the case of the girl being raped in the bathroom, the rights and safety of the female were superseded. In any other situation, if she'd simply been raped by any other man, the story would have been completely different. In this case, it was more important to protect transgender policy than support the victim. Now, there are plenty of people who don't agree with what I have said so far in this video, and there are plenty of people who do not perceive the world like this. For most of us, this is speculation, and this is just predicated on observable fact, or the way at least that we respond to social situations and the particular people involved in those situations. I think all in all, proponents of the victimhood hierarchy would have you believe that being part of a minority group entitles you to special treatment and considerations. But this special treatment often comes at the expense of others, even other minority groups. What's sad is that in the name of protecting those at the top of the hierarchy, certain situations are swept under the rug, or people, like in the case of Dave Chappelle, are unfairly targeted, just so that progressives can be viewed as inclusive and supportive. I do want to note here too that I certainly don't view transgender people as predators. That is not what I'm trying to say here at all. That's not what this video is about. But I do think it goes to show that transgender policies can and sometimes do open the door to bad faith actors, whether those people are transgender or not. In the end, as long as there is a hierarchy of victimhood and suffering, those who are further down the list will always find themselves in situations where their concerns and grievances, no matter how legitimate, will fall by the wayside. And apparently, this is all in the name of inclusivity, fairness, protection, and equality. Well, someone probably should have told Scott Smith that. Now, before I open the floor to all of you, this is just a reminder that you can download Scentbird using the link in the description. When you do, you'll receive 30% off your first month, which is pretty cool. Now, open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Is transgender policy opening the door to bad faith actors? Do you think that transgender policy is necessary? Do you believe that there is, in fact, a structure when it comes to victimhood? Do you think that some people are at the top and others are at the bottom? Do you think that this is all a completely ridiculous idea and it's not happening at all? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe and the thumbs up button. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to do so, just be respectful about it, and I will see you guys next time.